Talking about Achtos. And as I explained to you, the Alter Rebbe brings Achtos because he wants to argue that every mitzvah is Achtos and every Aved is Aved Zara, and therefore a person should be Meizen Nefesh for the smallest, so-called smallest Aved, smallest, biggest, smallest mitzvah, smallest Aved, because you look at it as a Merida B'Melech Malchei Amlocha Makadosh Baruch Hu. You don't look at the act, you look at the commander. So he has to first explain Achtos. And explaining Achtos, he does it b'derech leizu afzu, a lower level and a higher level. The lower level is Perek Chaf, and the higher level is Perek Chaf. What's the lower level? That the whole world is created only from a ha'ara. That the whole world is created only from air that comes out of the Eibishter's mouth. I think I mentioned the other day when we learned it, that when a person speaks, three things happen, right? The words become separated from the person, they say one word at a time, and the amount of hevel one invests has to be limited, and speech is chutz liyetz. The second issue, which we're about to learn, is that the words that a person uses when he speaks are kolochashiv, have little value compared to the person himself. In other words, in Perek Chaf, we're going to say the world doesn't exist, not because it doesn't exist. It does exist, but it's like saying a word exists. What's a word? What's a word? A word is nothing. Nobody's going to make a big deal out of a word. So, the whole creation is a word that got by the Eibishter. So in Perek Chaf, we're not saying there's no world, we're simply saying the word there's no chashivas. Chaf Aleph is going to add that even this one word was never spoken. Simsim Shalei Kim Shutei. But in Perek Chaf, we're not doing that. Perek Chaf, we're saying the whole creation is a word, but B'meila, the world has no chashivas compared to the Eibishter. Well, Moshe, for example, my benefesh adam, the soul of a person. The person speaks one word. Yeah, and the nimshal, it's the one word is B'ko Havaya Tzorei Lamim, B'yud Nivrei Lam Habo, B'hei Nivrei Lam Hazeh. Shadibah Zelava, this one word, Klom Mamish, is Mamish like nothing. Afilu even Lagabi Klolus Nafsham Adabes, when compared to the general soul of speech. Shehu, that the general soul of speech is Bechinis Lavusha Mtzoi Shalah, only the middle garment of the Neshama. Right, the Neshama has three garments. The inner garment is Machshava, and the outer garment is Asiyah Maisa, and the middle garment is speech. Shukech Adibah Shalah, which is the power of speech. That since here, since a person could speak an infinite number of words, right? Of course, in reality, you can't speak an infinite number of words. You don't live long enough. But mitzad the Keich Adibah, you never run out of words. So the Keich Adibah, you could speak bli gvul. So what's word? One word compared to Keich Adibah, huh? And the Alter Rebbe is saying Punkt Faket. I want to know what the source of that argument is, because the Alter Rebbe is saying Meferish Punkt Faket. Says the Alter Rebbe, if one word is Klochashiv compared to the Keich Adibah, Ve'kolshken, how much more so, Legabe, when compared to Bechinas Levusha Pnimi Shala, the inner garment of the Neshama, Shehu HaMachshava, which is the Madrega of thought, Shemimenu Nimshcha Wadibur, from which the words come, V'hichayutzam, and the Machshava is the highest of the word. In other words, Dibur, you already have an Einarech, one word that can be bligvul words. When you compare it to Machshava, you have a double Einarech. People, the way people say it is, you speak in words, think in images. Right? You think in pictures. In the thought, you have many, many words, but in one flash, in one point. One word compared to how much you could think is doubly nothing if it's nothing compared to how much you could speak. And even more so, when you compare to the very essence of the neshama, what are the essence of the neshama? The 10 faculties discussed above in Perek Daled, Chabad, Chagas. Now, the Alter Rebbe is saying that in your neshama, in your seichel amitas, there's no words. Now you know in Aina that that's not true. When you learn an idea, you have to think. When you feel an emotion, you have to think. But the Alter Rebbe holds that the oisius of seichel, the oisius of chokhmah and bin and midas, even though they're so secondary to the oira seichel, to the oira regesh, for all intents and purposes, the oisius are not there. As opposed to oisius of machshava. Oisius of machshava are difficult. When a person thinks oisius of machshava, it's not the pshat that they're thinking an idea. They're thinking about it. They're thinking about practically how to apply that idea, utilize that idea. And when you think a thought that's practical, for example, think how to speak something, it's a totally different type of machshava than when you're thinking an idea theoretically. When you're thinking an idea theoretically, the oisius are totally bottle. When you're thinking what to say, these are much more real. So Alter Rebbe says, in Dibur there's oisius, and in machshava there's oisius. One word that got to be close to nefesh Dibur is garnish. The close nefesh machshava is 2 times garnish. Ve'ein tzarech leimen, how much more so like Mutz v'yasmas and nefesh and neshama itself. Shehi netzah b'chinaseh hanach Chabad v'chu, which is the 10 levels of Chabad, etc. That the letters of thought, which are the foundations of the letters of speech, come from the neshama itself, that are manifested in the spoken word when one speaks, right? One word compared to how much you could speak. then that one word compared to how much you could think. And then that one word compared to the nefesh itself. It's 3 times kloch hashiv. It's almost nothing. Ki ha-machshava, when you're comparing thought to speech, higamkim b'chinas eisias kimei adibur. Machshava has eisias, and dibur has eisias. Rak nor v'zheden, shein ruchnis v'dakes, yesi. The eisias of machshava are more edel. So eisias of machshava are eisias. Eisias of dibur are also eisias. Aval esa b'chinas chabad v'choli, the neshama itself, hein sheirush v'mokara machshava, the root and source of eisias, of thought. You don't have letters at all. Before it goes on into thought. Everybody knows what it means to speak. What's the difference between thought and speech? The basic difference between thought and speech, besides for the fact that speech is to somebody else and thought is for yourself, is that when you speak, what matters first is how it sounds. What matters second is what you want to be heard. If you speak and no one knows what you're talking about, you didn't speak. Dibur is the pshat el azulas. Speech is defined by thinking about azulas. So the essence of speech is tzimtzum. I'm thinking about you and how you're going to be able to understand. When a person thinks, machshava, since it's about me and not about you, I'm not thinking about how it sounds, I'm thinking about what I'm saying. It's much edeler. But machshava also, when I'm thinking about what I'm saying as a preparation to what I'm going to do, it also has the shaykhas to mitzvahs. What about when I'm thinking about what I'm saying, thinking about an idea, it has no shaykhas, not the machshava, not the dibur. The Alter Rebbe argues that when you're thinking a thought in a level of seichel, which has no shaykhas to see at all, when you're thinking a thought in a level of seichel, which has no shaykhas to see at all, the Rebbe says, in dibur you could say there's oisius. In machshava you could say there's oisius. In the nefesh, when you think an idea, and you have no intentions of ever repeating it, you think totally different. So the Alter Rebbe's point is that one word compared to the nefesh is kilah times kilah times kilah. One word's kilah compared to how much you could speak. It's 2 times kilah compared to how much you could think. It's 3 times kilah compared to the nefesh itself. L'mosh. And he explains it. Why the Alter Rebbe gives this moshel, I don't know. And he's mamish, he's arichas l'cheira. The pashtas is a very simple shtick. You have to just remember one thing, okay? The brain serves 2 purposes. Seichel and machshava. So when he says it goes from the brain to the heart and back to the brain, don't get confused. The first brain is seichel. The second brain is machshava. The first brain has no oisius. The second brain has oisius. So for example, if a person has a love or desire in his heart, midas, kaidem before that it rises up from the heart of the brain, to think about it practically. In your emotion, the emotions are so strong that in the emotions it's not felt. Bechinas eisius, the idea of eisius adayin yet. Raknava then, chayif, it's posh, a simple desire, v'chasheka b'leiv, and a longing in the heart, ladavar ahu, to that thing, hanechmad, which is sought after, which is desired, etzlei, to the person. Even more so, before the desire and longing, lust, fell into your heart, to that thing. It was in your chokhmah, seichel, v'yediyah. Over here, chokhmah is chokhmah, and seichel must be bina. The idea must mean das. Usually seichel means chokhmah, over here seichel has to mean bina, and that's how it is also one of the mamorim of Samach Vav. The person knows in his brain about this thing, shu nechma, that it's pleasant, v'noim, and it's sweet, v'tayv, and it's good, v'yafar, it's pretty, la'asiga, to reach it, v'davar beit to become attached to it. Again, for example, lilmad is a chokhmah, to learn a wisdom, or to tasty food. So when you know in your brain that something is good, and even when you feel in your heart that something is good, says the Alter Rebbe, there's no oisius, and I'm telling you there are, because Alter says there are not. But the oisius are bottled to the oil of the seichel, to the oil of the midas. Rak narva, then turn the page. It descended from his seichel into was the desire and the whatever it is, the taiva in his heart. Bekeach, chokhmas v'sichel, that's with the power of his chokhmas, seichel, das. And again, he uses the word seichel for bina. So you started out in your brain where you're thinking the idea of how this is good. And then it went down into your heart to feel that it's good. In those 2 circumstances, moichen u'midas, seichel u'midas, there's no oisius that are more gushes. And afterwards, chazred returns, also went back up in a level of meich from the heart to the brain again. But now you're not just having it in the brain to think about it theoretically, but to think about it in practical terms. To bring forward this taiva from the potential of the actual lahasik to reach hamaichel, the food, or the midas hasechel to learn the idea b'peil. So when you think about an idea theoretically, there's no oisius. When you think about an idea practically, then there are oisius. Says the Rebbe Harei Bakan, at this moment, when you're thinking in practical terms, Nailda gives birth to Bechinas Eisias B'meichel, letters in his mind. Shein Eisias, which are the letters, Klesheinam Ba'am, the language of all people. Hamedabrim V'maharim, that speak and also think, Bahem, using his Eisias, Kol Yoni Ha'elam, matters of this world. And it is only when you're thinking practically in practical terms, or you're speaking of the Eisias Morgoshes, and the Nimshal is, the whole creation is one word. So we're not saying there's no world. We're saying there's no chshivas to the world, because the world, like Abba Deibishter, is one spoken word. And Perek Chaf Aleph is going to begin with Dibur Shalei Kipshutei, that even this one word was never really separated from the Eibishter, was never really spoken.
This ends the current sheet.